Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, and welcome to this episode of our program. Today we have with us Dr. Stephen Lewis, who is a chiropractor, and he's with Doctors Nutrition of Texas. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and looking forward to a great conversation here today with Dr. Lewis about the thyroid. So, Dr. Lewis, welcome to the program, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I was trained as a chiropractor, and although I think nerve supply is extremely important, it is evident very quickly in my career that nerve supply is not complete unless you have proper nutrition. And one of the reasons we've noticed that America really is dead last in overall health, and you have to ask yourself why, because we have the best medical profession in the world, so something's missing. And what is missing is our foods are genetically modified. Their nutrient level has gone down, anywhere from 50 to 98%, depending on what research you read. And we have about 60,000 toxins that weren't as prevalent back in the 1940s. And these toxins wreak havoc on your health and your thyroid. And you don't have enough nutrients in the food, even organic food, to let your body rev up and detoxify this increased amount of toxins. So that's why thyroid is one of my favorite subjects, and I've kind of specialized in that.
It really, when you were mentioning that, it made me think of something which is nutrients, and over the years and decades, the nutrients in our foods from many reasons, but, the way that they're grown and pesticides and all of that, they're not as good as they used to be. So what is it that people do? They try to supplement that. And that, I would suspect, is a whole other topic, but in a brief thought, can you speak to why people that attempt to supplement with vitamins and nutrients and, minerals, they might not be getting as good of supplementation as they even think, because even the supplements aren't as well made as they used to be?
That's a really good point, because most supplements are really not that good, and some of them actually have cancer-causing things in them, just like our drugs do, like titanium dioxide and some of the dyes. Why do you need to dye a drug or a vitamin? So you're taking in some of the bad things. So you have to be very, very careful of the supplements that you take. And there are definite differences, just like there's differences in people. Some are really, really wonderful, and some are not so functional.
Yeah.
So, we have to target that. And I think it's important to have the knowledge and the understanding of what's missing in your body as a whole, or your thyroid specifically. But you have to go with someone you really trust, and somebody that can show you on lab work what the problem is. But more important than knowledge is the willingness to do it, the faith, the trust, and your habits of putting good nutrients into the body and giving it time. Time's one of the key factors in the equation in getting healthy.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like an analogy. I'm sure we can create many, many analogies, but like the analogy of a car. For a car to run well, you better have, a great engine, okay? But for that engine to run well, you better put good things in it. And I'll bet you if we put some really low-grade gas compared to high-grade gas, it's going to run differently, knock or ping or whatever. Same with kind of nutrients. So I think that's a wonderful place to be thinking about the thyroid, which is just one of the many elements in our body that has to run right. My wife is taking graduate work classes in music education, and I remember last summer she was taking a class and talking about the throat and the larynx. And one of the videos they had her watch was how the larynx works, and they put a scope down a group of people's throats and had them sing a song. And you could see actually the anatomy and physiology of how it was opening and closing. So is there an anatomy and physiology of the thyroid that would be relevant or helpful to understand as we're thinking about this?
Well, I think in a general overview, again, when I talk to people, I try to impart knowledge, but you have to keep in mind that knowledge is just knowing, wisdom is doing. And foolishness is knowing but not doing. But yeah, I had a patient yesterday, and she was crazy in the head, and she knew it. Her family said, oh, she did great as long as she did our supplements. So she came back, and she said, I read 36 thyroid books. And she says, I couldn't get to a place where I was healthy. And I said, you should never treat yourself because you don't have the objectivity that's necessary to see what's going on. And to paraphrase Einstein, he basically said you can't fix the problem with the same consciousness that was there when you created the problem.
That's a really good point. Kind of like the definition of insanity. If you keep doing the same old thing, you're going to get the same old result. So what got you here, you need to do something different to move you past where you are. So what are some of the common misconceptions people have about the thyroid? You mentioned, treating yourself, and that's so common these days. We go Google it or go to WebMD and think we've got it figured out. But what are some of the things you see people coming into you when they have a thyroid issue that they thought they were treating it right, but now they're not?
Well, we look specifically on lab, not for the parameters that are called normal, but they're not normal. That's what is common to about 95% of America. So it's not in range that we're looking for. We're looking for in optimal range, which in some of the parameters need to be in the middle 30% or so, and some of them need to be high and low, which I explain to the patient. But, the anatomy is just, it's a butterfly-shaped gland on the front of the throat, and it is so responsible for so many other functions. It may affect your energy level. It could affect your heart. It affects your digestion. It affects how you feel mentally. And so if somebody's listening to this, one of the reasons I would like for you to just consider, why would you continue to listen to this? Well, some of the symptoms that can and many times go with a thyroid imbalance is acne, allergies, arthritis, birth defects, brittle nails, cancer, candida, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, constipation, fibrocystic breast, dry skin, diabetes, fatigue, fluid retention, hair loss, a lot of headaches, high cholesterol. And, that's always been one of my pet peeves. People keep trying to lower cholesterol, which is kind of crazy to start with. That's just the messenger. Many, many, many times, once you get the thyroid normal, the cholesterol goes down and is perfect. So, there's so many, and that's just a very small list of things. A low immune system. If you catch everything that comes along, it could be your thyroid. And it has to do, I mentioned before, gut function. Well, 70 to 80% of your immune system's in your GI tract. So which comes first? An impaired immune system in your GI tract causing the thyroid problem, which is definitely a possibility, or the thyroid causing the GI problem. And it takes an outside objective person to figure that out and put so many different pieces in this equation so that we can figure it out and then make a natural approach to allowing your thyroid to work like it already knows how to work, but it knows how. It just doesn't have what it takes, nutritionally to happen.
You mentioned that some of the indicators are just the messenger, and you treat the messenger, and
right.
You think that's great. Let's take some medicine for high cholesterol. But in reality, if in this specific case that thyroid issue is the cause of that, then you're treating the wrong thing, and it's just going to come back and come back. So it's kind of like putting, the cart before the horse, or which came first, the chicken or the egg. So yes. Made me kind of think, what other impacts? So obviously we cannot say that the thyroid would be the only cause for that increased cholesterol count, but you're saying that if you were to focus on the thyroid, that could eliminate much of that indication. But there's other things that would affect the cholesterol, as an example.
Yeah, well, liver function does. We're seeing more and more people, even 16, 18-year-olds that have fatty liver or the beginnings of fatty liver. And that's because of our increased carbohydrate consumption and high fructose corn syrup that these kids have been living on all of their life. Things were different. When I was a kid, we weren't allowed but one starch per meal. And now if you look at most meals, it's 3 or 4 starches plus, you're sucking down that 32-ounce high fructose corn syrup, make you fat and give you fatty liver soft drink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that society conditions us. We could probably turn this into a whole, marketing messaging conversation that contributes to these things, because what is you've heard the campaign, you deserve a break today. Oh yeah, you deserve a break today. Come get this, nice old meal. And when you break it down and look at the nutrients, what kind of a break is that? Your body deserves a break from that, really is what it is. But I think that really is interesting in seeing how some of the diseases or indications that older people used to be the ones that would get, and now it's like, diabetes, I'm a teenager. Well, let's look at how you've been eating or not exercising. So I think lifestyle and conditioning in how we've been brought up and allowed to act and eat sure does play a huge role into that.
Yeah, well, I even taught my kids when they were very young not to give in to what they hear on a commercial, because they'd say, well, Daddy, they said that. And I said, yes, but here's the way to think about it differently so that you can make your own choice. And they grew up to be very, very responsible adults that think rather than react. So I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, but then why is it that all the health food tastes not as good as all the nasty food?
Well, your taste buds do change, and they can change back. And a lot of times it's actually a candida or yeast overgrowth in the GI tract or the wrong bacteria, and that's a whole different subject. But they actually control your brain more than your brain controls the GI tract. There's books written on that about the GI tract being the second brains, and the question was which one's controlling which one. And that's a whole different subject. But once you get the proper probiotics in there, and that takes a pretty dedicated effort, because people say, well, I'm going to eat healthy. And then they eat a piece of chicken. Well, chicken was grown with arsenic and antibiotics, and so you have a new dose of antibiotics in your GI tract, which killing your good bacteria. So you have to do that. I read that, well, this company's going to phase out antibiotic grown chicken, because antibiotics actually make these chickens and cows faster. So think obesity in America, which part of that's thyroid, but part of it's what you're putting in your gut. And again, it's an incredibly complex equation to put all these things in the equation to get the answer at the end. And many, many times the answer is different for different people. And that's why you can't get on Google and figure it out by yourself. Janet and I were in Hot Springs one time, and she wasn't feeling real good. So I went on to sleep, and in the morning she says, Stephen, I found out what my problem is through Google. And I said, well, great, what is it? She said, Google told me I had prostate cancer.
Yeah, women don't have a prostate.
Right. I mean, that's a good point. Some people might not have known that. But
yeah, I don't know anything about medical, but I think I know that one. Hey, so you mentioned GI. Can you think of one specific positive impact that the thyroid has on GI? And can you think of and speak to one negative impact that thyroid has on GI?
Speaking in generalizations, if you have hyperthyroid, or the thyroid's working too fast, too hot, it will many, many times cause diarrhea. Most of the people have hypothyroidism because of the plastics, the pesticides, the bromine, the bromide, the fluorine we'll get into later, that's taken the place of iodine, and so your thyroid's not working as hot as it should, and then you have constipation. So how many of you out there listening are chronically constipated? One of the negatives, or maybe not a negative, but maybe a good analogy, is if you're like Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show, or Don Knotts played the ghost in Mr. Chicken, his hyper-irritability, that is hyperthyroidism. And if you're sluggish and you get up after 12 to 14 hours of sleep and you're dragging your rear end out of bed trying to think about when you can lay back down and take a nap, that's usually hypothyroidism or sluggish thyroid.
And a lot of knee-jerk reaction or self-diagnosis might say, well, I think I've got chronic fatigue or chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. So some of those things could be the case, but thyroid could be impacting on those as well. What is it specifically that would make someone go, hey, this is I'm too tired or I'm too irritable, but I'm irritable because I didn't get enough sleep and, I'm under a lot of stress. Well, what would make them think maybe I should check the thyroid?
Well, many times functioning or a not functioning thyroid can create fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or lower your immune system so that you get mono or Epstein-Barr or some of the, chronic viral diseases. I think the thyroid is pretty much the master gland, although it has a lot of input from the hypothalamus in the brain to the pituitary, and the pituitary puts out the thyroid-stimulating hormone. But the old adage of if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, that would describe the thyroid. So I'd start there and then work down from that.
So your comment there made me think of a good question, I think. Once negatively impacted, like once some of these things start manifesting and you seeing some of these, like, constipation or irritability or fibromyalgia as an example. So that's a negative impact that might have been really caused or triggered by thyroid condition, hypo, or many of these conditions. Once you start focusing on and addressing dealing with the thyroid, can some of those conditions be reversed or at least improved?
Most of the time they can be improved. The people that have trouble losing weight, I'd check the thyroid first, and then I'd, get realistic with what you're really eating, what you've been conditioned to think is food, but it's really not. But, yeah, there's so many different factors here that, we can go anywhere. I just think the thyroid's the first and foremost thing that we should check and get optimal. And then it's just a cascade of, well, is it the liver? Is it the GI tract? Is it the stomach? Is it the food that you're eating? Is it the toxins in our environment? Is it something in the cleaning products that you use? Is it the fluoride in your water? So you can see this can be a very, very complex thing. But there's a principle in physics, Occam's razor, that says when you're confronted with so many different possibilities and so many different answers, the real and the best answer is pick the simplest one.
You can go a lot of places with that one. Many times it really is from the aspect of if you built up some laborious and complicated and intricate solution, sometimes that's just your psychology or yourself trying to keep you from doing anything because it's just too much and too hard. So, hey, do the simplest one. Or from a financial perspective, we've heard Dave Ramsey, who talks about the debt snowball, and pick that little credit card with the smallest balance, pay that dude off, and roll on to the next one. And why do you do that? Because you get some momentum, and it's easier to focus on. And so I think that's a really neat analogy. So, some of these health-related things, it doesn't have to be super hard and super laborious, but I think you made a really powerful comment that what if we looked at the thyroid as the master gland? I've even in my readings heard the pituitary called the master gland. Is there a connection there as well with the thyroid?
Well, yes, the pituitary has to put out the thyroid-stimulating hormone. And, on lab, most doctors will say, well, you're in normal range. Well, on most labs, the normal range is a 0.45 to a 4.5. Well, if you're not on the low end of that range, that means your pituitary is putting out the hormone to stimulate the thyroid, but the thyroid's not working, because if the thyroid's working, your TSH will go low, like a 1.5 or below. And there's other things you need to look at. But, the biggest problem in getting well is not knowing what to do. It's doing what you know. And we have been conditioned as a society, I think, to become impatient. I always use the example of, as a society, we're like a man with a remote control. A man doesn't want to know what's on TV. They want to know what else is on.
Yep.
So people are too quick to jump ship and go on to the next big thing before the right you're on the right track. Don't jump tracks. And, even some of the experts say that it should take 6 months to 2 or 3 years to get the thyroid normal. Most people don't stick with it because they still have a pain. We have to stop focusing on what's wrong and start focusing on what's right. The positive people with the perfect positive outlook, they're the ones that get well. The ones that say, well, I still have the symptom, you're focusing on the wrong thing, and they're not as likely to get well.
Yeah, I mean, boy, we could take that one statement you just said and spend hours and hours on how that applies to life and your condition, because it made me think of, knowledge is power. A lot of people hear that and believe that, knowledge is power, but that's incorrect, because knowledge is only potential power. You got to do something with it. The true power comes in is applying that knowledge. And then, like you said, about keep on keeping on, and it's like the analogy in the story about the gold digger that digs, and then he's like, there's nothing here, he gives up, and the next guy comes in, and boom, one hit, he's hit the strike. And then your last point there was like shiny object syndrome, or, the movie Up, where the dog's like squirrel. It's like you don't stick with it long enough to really get the results you need. And in business, life, nutrition, just because I don't know in your area of the country if you've seen this commercial, but I even forget what it was for, but basically there's a bunch of these people that go, hey, what if doing one push-up got you right back in shape? And it shows the guy doing one push-up going, yay. Or what if eating one piece of celery got you totally healthy? And well, you got to do it the right way, and then do it over and over and consistently, and that all of a sudden gets your system used to the right nutrition. So can you speak to that consistency factor and how you can keep people and your patients focused on the right things so that they're motivated to stick with it?
Well, I always tell them that they can call me or email me. I'm very available. Even on vacation, I'll be answering emails at 9 o'clock at night, and Janet will tell me to stop. It's like, no, I want to help a lot of people. Many times I will say, listen to your discerning spirit. And, if you're a woman out there listening, that would be your intuition. I think women kind of have an advantage because they listen to their intuition. And I don't know if men have it or not, or we've just been trained it's not a good thing to listen to, but your intuition and your faith will carry you much, much further than your knowledge and the shallow rah-rah sessions. So find something you have faith in and keep going. It doesn't mean you won't have bad days, but you'll have more good days, and your bad days will continue to get better and better. But just stick with it, because if the experts say 6 months to 3 years to normalize a thyroid, and, think about it, if it takes 9 months to make a baby, your body's physiology, there are some limits to physiological change, and some of those limits are time.
And it didn't take you, it took you a lot longer to get into that condition than you're trying to get out of it. If you're 30 pounds overweight, you can't do a crash diet and lose 30 pounds in a week or two. And even if you did, it's going to come all back, because it's just that kind of homeostasis, I'm sure, that would apply there. And I would even interject that you need to have a reason why behind what you're trying to do. So if it's going to be 6 to 12 months, and you need to realize, I don't like the condition I'm in now. Here's the condition I want to be in, and what it will feel like, and how I'll be able to have more energy and the goal in mind that will keep you focused on staying the course when you're focusing on some of these thyroid related activities. Because as you know, once you've identified the thyroid is one of the sources for your condition, there's actions you have to take. So you got to stick with it. You got to have that why behind your process.
Well, that's one of the questions that I usually will ask somebody. Well, if this is not fixed, how will that change your life? And sometimes you have to go into that question several times before the person realizes why they're doing it. If you're 400 pounds and you say, well, I want to be able to roll around on the ground with my 4-year-old, and I want to see my 4-year-old grow up and, graduate high school. And I said, well, that's pretty good motivation. Now, there's two different motivations, is moving away from pain or moving toward pleasure. Janet, has the genetic or family tendency toward diabetes, and although she's a little bitty small girl, she watches what she eats, but her motivation is because she saw weight loss in her grandfather when they would cut off big chunks of his leg from diabetes. So therefore, she will not eat the things that she know would put her body in metabolic acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. She knows all this stuff as well as I do, but she says, no, I'm not going to eat that because I remember my grandfather. And, I know what happened when my daddy died early at age 53 from ulcerative colitis, which very well could have been partially a bad thyroid. And it's like I was 15. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to do that to my children and now grandchildren. So we're motivated out of serving others.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, and I think you have to take it even to a deep level of, well, I do want to see my kids graduate from, or my grandkids participate in, and what exactly is that? And what can you involve your five senses? What would you be seeing in that? What would you be smelling in that? And then really just living in that so that you can really center that in your goal setting. And it might sound strange to kind of think about, well, I'm going to be in an open field watching my grandkids graduate from high school and smelling freshly cut grass. But guess what? If that helps you live in the moment of that future moment and go, you know what, if that's the case, then I better stay the course. Or I don't want to have this limb cut off from this disease. So, you know what, that sleeve of cookies might taste really good tonight, but I think I'm going to have a half of one. That's not to say that you can never, ever have one cookie. It just, you've got to get it in balance. And maybe you need to have a, kind of a hold fast from these things for a while and then ease things back in. So you had mentioned earlier about the thyroid and its effect on carbohydrate. How can you speak to, like, how does the carbohydrate metabolism benefit our body, and then how does the thyroid functioning properly help with that function?
Well, you went from preaching to meddling when you're talking about a sleeve of cookies, since it's post-Girl Scout time. So, you've been reading my mail, haven't you? The thyroid and the different hormones have to do with speeding up heart function, increasing blood flow, and that's blood flow to the stomach and GI tract. Carbohydrate metabolism is very, very important, but as a whole, America eats way too many carbohydrates. That's one of the best things you can do is learn what a carbohydrate is, simple versus complex, and stay away from the simple carbohydrates. Generally speaking, if it's hyper or it's putting out an overabundance of hormones, those people can eat all the carbohydrates they want and they still remain pretty thin. I used Don Knotts as an example. He's one of them, and he had all the symptoms of a hyperthyroid, just like First Lady Barbara Bush, had the bulging eyes or the exophthalmos. And I said years before anybody brought it up, I said, she's got Graves' disease. So there are small signs and symptoms that you can look at, but if you can eat just a few carbohydrates and gain weight, it's probably hypo or sluggish thyroid. And that's why obesity's, it's one of the reasons that people can't lose weight. So you get that, the thyroid goes back to normal.
Wrap us up. What would you say one final thought is with people that would be hearing, even for the first time, the thyroid can affect so many functions in the body? What's one thought to leave us with, and then how could people learn more about how you work with patients?
Well, there's such a long list of symptoms, and I only got about a third of the way into it. But, if you have unresolved symptoms, or if your doctor says you're fine, but you don't feel you're fine, I think it would be smart to check your thyroid first. And, I do my best to make it simple and affordable. I do extremely inexpensive lab work where a lot of doctors will just check the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and that's important, but it's not nearly thorough enough. Janet and I started out with 5 different parts of the thyroid, and That way we have a better understanding. And then if something looks really off, we can add, certain, like thyroid peroxidase, to see if there's an autoimmune disease such as Hashimoto's. But, I'd get started there. You can Google the symptoms, but again, don't diagnose yourself. It's just not very effective for most people.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. So can you tell us your website and the what people would learn when they arrive at your website and how they can connect with you?
Well, that's the easiest way. It's doctorsnutrition.org, and that's spelled drsnutrition.org. You can fill out a health survey, and I will call you. And although I'm spread thin from time to time, I still have time to help more people, because that's my goal, is to help as many people as I can, not just to educate them on what their problem is, but more importantly, to have them focus on what the solution is. That's the real key, is the solution. I normally, about 99 times out of 100, I'm the one that calls the people that fill out the health survey, and we can order lab all over America. So,
yeah, so you don't need to be in one certain area, and having someone to go over the lab work with you and help you understand it would be very, very encouraging, I would suspect. So I would just encourage people to take that step to learn a little bit more about their thyroid health and how it affects so many things. So it's been super educational to have you talk today with us, and I thank you for your time, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.